36 stab wounds, that's what it took. By the 12th cut, Ulysses Rollins was already done for. By the 24th, he'd lost an eye. By the 36th, 200 people in that Harlem restaurant were too scared to even breathe. And then Bumpy Johnson did something wild. He stood up, fixed his tie, stepped right over the guy's body like it was nothing, and asked the waiter for spaghetti. This wasn't just some brawl. This was Bumpy sending a message loud and clear. Walk down Lenox Avenue back then, and you could feel trouble brewing. Two powerful forces were about to clash. Dutch Schultz, this German Jewish gangster, ran half of New York's underworld. He wanted Harlem's numbers game, all of it, and didn't care how many people he had to hurt to get it. Standing in his way was Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson, 30 years old and already known as Harlem's most dangerous man. He worked for Stephanie Saint, Claire, the brilliant numbers queen who'd built an empire from scratch. Bumpy had promised her one thing: Harlem stays in black hands, no matter what. Schultz had already sent plenty of men into Harlem. Bumpy and his crew had been taking them out one by one. His wife later wrote it was pretty easy since white guys stood out during the day in Harlem. But Schultz was getting desperate. He needed someone who could actually handle Bumpy Johnson. Someone fearless, someone just as violent. So he called Chicago. This guy was massive, 6'2", 240 pounds of pure muscle and scars. He'd killed 11 men before turning 25. They called him the Bull because once he came at you, there was no stopping him. Schultz threw $5,000 at him up front, promised another 10 if he took out Bumpy. Make it loud, Schultz told him. Make it public. I want every numbers runner in Harlem to see what happens when they push back. Rollins hit Harlem on a Tuesday. By Thursday, word was everywhere. Schultz's new enforcer was in town hunting for Bumpy. Here's what Rollins didn't get about Harlem, though. In Bumpy's neighborhood, everything had eyes. The shoeshine kids, newspaper guys, flower ladies on corners. They all worked for Bumpy. By Friday morning, Bumpy knew everything. What hotel Rollins was at, what he ate for breakfast, the .45 he carried, the knife in his boot, and most importantly, that Rollins was watching him. That Friday, Bumpy had a date with Helen Lawson, a senior editor at Vanity Fair. She was white, educated at Vassar, wrote Broadway reviews, and interviewed movie stars. She was also fascinated by Bumpy. They'd met at a jazz club 3 weeks back. She was researching Harlem's Renaissance. Bumpy was intrigued by this white woman who wasn't scared to sit in a black club and ask smart questions. Dinner at the Alhambra, best jazz in Harlem, great food too. The Alhambra on 126th and 7th was Harlem royalty. Duke Ellington played there. Billie Holiday sang there. Friday nights, the place was packed. Musicians, hustlers, intellectuals, everybody who mattered. Bumpy showed up at 8 sharp in a charcoal suit, burgundy tie, shoes shined like mirrors, fedora just right. Looked more like a banker than a killer. Helen was already there in a blue dress and pearls. Drinks, conversation, the jazz quartet playing something smooth. Everything was perfect. Then at 8:47, the door opened. Ulysses Rollins walked in. Bumpy spotted him immediately. The way he moved, shoulders back, scanning the room like a hunter, told Bumpy everything. This wasn't a guy coming for dinner. Their eyes met. Rollins smiled, not friendly. The smile of someone who just found their target. Helen noticed Bumpy change. The relaxed gentleman vanished, replaced by something harder. Bumpy, something wrong? No, everything's fine. Excuse me for a second. Rollins made his way through the tables slowly, deliberately. He wanted everyone watching. This was the job, a public execution. He stopped at their table, standing while Bumpy sat. You Bumpy Johnson? Loud enough for nearby tables to hear. Depends who's asking. Dutch Schultz sends his regards, says you've been a problem, says problems need solving. The jazz kept playing, but conversations died. People sensed something coming. Tell Dutch Harlem already solved its problem with him. He just doesn't know it yet. Rollins laughed. Big words for a man sitting down. Then Bumpy caught it. Rollins' hand drifting toward his jacket, toward that pistol. And Bumpy made a choice. If Rollins pulled that gun, innocent people would die. Helen, the musicians, the waiters. Bullets don't discriminate in a crowded room. So Bumpy moved first. It happened so fast most people only saw the aftermath. Bumpy's hand shot to the table, grabbed the steak knife by his plate. 6 inches long, serrated, sharp enough to cut bone. Rollins saw the movement, went for his gun, but Bumpy was already up. He exploded from his chair with inhuman speed. The chair flew back. Helen gasped. Bumpy drove the knife forward. First cut caught Rollins' forearm as he drew. The gun hit the floor. Second cut opened his cheek. By the third, Rollins realized he wasn't fighting a man. This was something that moved like water and hit like lightning. They crashed into another table, glass shattered. Food everywhere, people screaming, scattering. But Bumpy didn't stop. 4, 5, 6. Rollins tried fighting back. He was bigger, stronger, but Bumpy was faster. Every swing Rollins threw, Bumpy slipped and the knife found flesh. Cut 12 caught his ribs. Cut 18 opened his shoulder. By cut 24, Rollins was on his knees. That's when Bumpy went for the eyes. Helen had pressed herself against the wall with other terrified people, but she couldn't look away. She watched Bumpy, the same man discussing Langston Hughes 5 minutes ago, systematically destroy someone twice his size. The knife moved like an extension of his arm, every motion precise, calculated. This wasn't rage, this was surgical. Cut 25 caught Rollins above his left eye. The blade went deep. When Bumpy pulled back, Rollins' eyeball came with it. Rollins screamed, a sound Helen would hear in nightmares for years. The whole restaurant went dead silent. Even the band stopped. 200 people frozen, watching something out of a horror movie. Bumpy stood up. Rollins was still on the floor, bleeding, face covered in blood, conscious but broken. And Bumpy, covered in blood that wasn't his, did something nobody expected. He reached down and straightened his tie. That gesture, so calm, so deliberate, sent chills through everyone there. This man just destroyed another human and he's adjusting his wardrobe like he finished a business meeting. Then Bumpy stepped over Rollins' body, not around it. Over it, like stepping over a puddle. He walked back to his table, picked up his fallen chair, set it right, sat down. Helen was still by the wall, staring. Bumpy looked at her and smiled, the same charming smile from when she arrived. "I apologize for the interruption." Voice perfectly calm, like nothing happened. Then he looked for their waiter who was pressed against the bar, white-faced. "Excuse me, could we get some menus? I seem to have worked up an appetite." The waiter didn't move. Nobody moved. Bumpy grabbed a menu himself from a nearby table, studied it, then looked at Helen. "You know what? I suddenly want spaghetti and meatballs." The waiter, hands shaking, took the order. Everyone just watched. Helen slowly made her way back. Her legs felt weak. She sat across from Bumpy, who was calmly wiping blood off his hands with a napkin. "You should go. This isn't a place you need to be." But Helen couldn't move. Shock, yes, but also witnessing something incredible. A man who just committed extreme violence sitting there like he's waiting for morning coffee. 8 minutes later, the spaghetti came. The waiter placed it in front of Bumpy, trembling. Steam rising. The red sauce looked almost black in the dim light. Through the windows, Helen saw an ambulance pulling up. Medics rushing in for Rollins, who was still on the floor, barely conscious. And Bumpy Johnson picked up his fork. He twirled the pasta slowly, deliberately, took a bite. Helen watched, unable to look away as this man ate. Not quickly, like proving a point. Slowly, casually, like he was genuinely enjoying it. "It's good," Bumpy said, glancing up. "You should eat something." Helen looked at her own plate, knocked aside during the fight. She couldn't imagine eating. Her stomach was in knots. But Bumpy ate 3 more bites, each one deliberate, each one a statement. By the time medics loaded Rollins onto a stretcher, Bumpy had finished half the plate. Police arrived as Bumpy set down his fork. The ambulance had already taken Rollins to Harlem Hospital. He'd survive but never see out of his left eye again. The cops knew better than to arrest Bumpy Johnson. Half were on his payroll. The other half knew that in Harlem, Bumpy was the law. "Self-defense," one officer wrote. "Victim drew weapon first. Multiple witnesses confirm." By Saturday morning, the story spread through Harlem like wildfire. Not just the violence, everyone had seen violence, but the way Bumpy ended it. The spaghetti. That detail became legendary. Fathers told sons, mothers told daughters. That's how Bumpy Johnson handles business. Cool as ice, even with blood on his hands. The story reached Dutch Schultz by noon. He was in his Bronx office when his lieutenant came in, white-faced. "Boss, Rollins is in the hospital. Bumpy Johnson cut him to pieces in a restaurant. took his eye out. Schultz put down his cigar. Is Rollins dead? No, but then he failed. Schultz stood, walked to the window. You know what the problem is? We keep thinking we can intimidate these Harlem guys. We keep thinking if we send someone bigger, meaner, stronger, they'll back down. So what do? Schultz was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something that would change mob history. We leave Harlem alone. What? You heard me. Bumpy Johnson just sent a message. The message is Harlem's not for sale. We've lost 40 men trying to take that neighborhood. 40. And Johnson isn't even breathing hard. Schultz turned to his lieutenant. Call Lucky Luciano. Tell him we need a sit-down. Tell him we need to make a deal with Bumpy Johnson. 6 months later, Dutch Schultz would be dead, killed on Lucky Luciano's orders. And Bumpy would negotiate the deal, making him godfather of Harlem, the first black man to sit at the table as an equal with the Italian Mafia. But that Friday night in 1935 at the Alhambra, Bumpy was just a man having dinner. A man who ordered spaghetti while another man's blood was still wet on the floor. After police left, Helen asked Bumpy to take her home. She couldn't stay another moment. The smell of spaghetti sauce mixed with blood made her sick. I'm sorry you had to see that, Bumpy said as they walked into the Harlem night. Helen was quiet, then said, That man came to kill you. Yes. And you knew he was going to? Yes. So the whole dinner was what? A trap? Bumpy stopped walking. He looked at Helen with something like sadness in his eyes. I didn't set a trap. I just lived my life. But when a man comes to kill you in front of innocent people, you handle it fast and you handle it final, so everyone knows what happens next time. Helen would write about that night years later in an unpublished memoir. She described Bumpy as the most contradictory man I ever met. A killer who quoted poetry, a gangster who tipped his hat to old women, a violent man who seemed to carry the weight of his violence like a cross. The story of the 36 cuts became Harlem legend. But here's what most people missed. Bumpy didn't just destroy Ulysses Rollins that night. He destroyed the idea that Harlem could be conquered by outside forces. Every mobster in New York heard the story. Every politician, every cop. They all understood the same message. Harlem protects its own. Bumpy would rule Harlem for the next 30 years. He'd go to prison twice, serve time in Alcatraz, negotiate with the Italian Mafia, protect Malcolm X, and become a legend. But that summer night in 1935 at the Alhambra, with 200 witnesses watching him step over a bleeding man and order spaghetti, Bumpy Johnson taught Harlem, and the world, a lesson about power. Real power isn't just violence. Any thug can kill. Real power is control, precision, the ability to destroy a man and then calmly straighten your tie. It's sending a message so clear, so final, you never have to send it again. Ulysses Rollins never returned to Harlem. Actually, he tried killing Bumpy one more time weeks later at Frank's restaurant on 125th Street. He fired a shot that missed Bumpy but killed an innocent woman nearby. That was Rollins's last act as a free man. He disappeared after that. Some say Bumpy's men found him. Some say he fled back to Chicago. Nobody knows for sure. But everyone knows this. After that night at the Alhambra, when anyone mentioned Bumpy Johnson's name, they did it with respect. Or they didn't mention it at all. Years later, an old man who was at the restaurant that night was asked what he remembered most. He thought about it for a long time. Then he said, "The spaghetti. I remember thinking, this man just took another man's eye out, and he's sitting there eating pasta like it's Sunday dinner. Not pretending. Actually eating it." That's when I knew. That's when we all knew. Bumpy Johnson wasn't just dangerous. He was something else. Something colder. Something you don't forget. And that's the truth about legends. They're not born in big moments. They're born in small ones. In the details. In the way a man adjusts his tie. In the way he steps over a body. In the way he orders spaghetti. 36 cuts, one message, one legend. That's the night Harlem learned who Bumpy Johnson really was.